There is a city in the world that has been destroyed 17 times. Not damaged, not invaded, destroyed, erased from the map, burned to the ground, abandoned, rebuilt, and destroyed again. A city that has been conquered by Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Crusaders, Ottomans, and the British, and that despite all of that is still standing today exactly where it has always been, on the same hills, with the same golden limestone stones that change color in the light of the sunset in a way that no modern architect has ever been able to replicate. A city that three of the greatest religions in history simultaneously claim as their own, that has produced more wars per square kilometer than any other place on the planet. And that appears in today's news in exactly the same way it appeared in historical records 3,000 years ago. That city is Jerusalem. And in the next few minutes, I am going to tell you its entire history, from the absolute beginning to the conflict that is in the headlines right now, in a way that nobody has ever told it to you before. If you are interested in truly understanding the world, not just the news, but the deep reason behind the news, subscribe now and hit the bell, because this is exactly what we do here, and you cannot miss what comes next. To understand Jerusalem, you have to start before Jerusalem existed, and that takes us to a hill in the Judean desert, at about 2,460 feet above sea level, sometime around the year 4000 BC. The hill had nothing particularly striking about it. It was not the highest in the region. It was not on the most important trade route. It did not have a river that made it strategically indispensable. It did have water, a spring that the ancient peoples called Gin, and in the desert water is worth more than gold, more than armies, more than any tactical advantage you can imagine. The first settlements on that hill date from between 4000 and 3500 BC, and their inhabitants were a Semitic people that Egyptian texts of that era called the Jebusites, desert people, practical builders, who erected a small and functional city that in the oldest texts appears with a name that academics transcribe as Jerusalem, which in the Semitic languages of the time meant something like foundation of peace or dwelling of peace. Jerusalem, the city that has known less peace than virtually any other place in human history, was called from the very beginning the City of Peace. The first time Jerusalem appears in a historical record you could physically touch today, if you went to the right museum, is in the Amarna letters, an Egyptian diplomatic archive from the 14th century BC. In those letters, a Jebusite king named Abdi-Heba writes to the pharaoh Akhenaten, the same pharaoh who revolutionized Egyptian religion with the cult of the solar god Aten, to ask for help against the pressures of neighboring peoples. The letter is written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language of the era, and in it appears the name Jerusalem, the oldest documented version of the name Jerusalem. Abdi-Heba was worried. He was right to be. Times were changing, and the hill on which he built his city was about to become the center of something that neither of them could have imagined. Because sometime around the year 1000 BC, according to the biblical narrative, which is the most detailed historical source we have for this period, a king of Israel named David conquered the Jebusite city and made it his capital. The story is well known. David defeated the Jebusite king, took the city that the texts call the Fortress of Zion, and renamed it the City of David. He brought the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object of the Israelite religion, and installed it in the city with a procession that, according to the biblical text, was so emotionally overwhelming that David himself danced in the streets in front of all the people. What David understood, with the political intuition of an extraordinary leader, is that to unify the 12 tribes of Israel, he needed a capital that belonged to none of them. Jerusalem was perfect precisely because it was Jebusite, because it was neutral, because it belonged to everyone and to no one at the same time. David's gesture was not only military, it was an act of political architecture of a sophistication that modern historians continue to admire. His son Solomon completed the work. Sometime around the year 960 BC, Solomon built on the highest hill in Jerusalem, Mount Moriah, the first temple. The building itself was not particularly enormous by the standards of the time. The Egyptian temples of Karnak or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia were much larger structures. But what the Temple of Solomon contained inside it, in the deepest chamber called the Holy of Holies, was the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark contained, according to tradition, the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments, The temple was not a place of worship in the sense that we understand a temple or a church today. It was literally the house of God on earth. It was the point where the divine and the human touched, and that changed the nature of Jerusalem forever. It stopped being just another city in the Judean desert. It became the center of the universe for a religious tradition that would in time produce Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Here I want you to pause for a moment and write to me in the comments. How much did you know about the history of Jerusalem before watching this video? Does it surprise you that all of this has 4,000 years of documented history? Write to me down below, because I am genuinely interested in knowing where each person who watches me is coming from. And your comment also tells the YouTube algorithm that this content deserves to reach more people who need to understand the real context of what is happening in the world today. Write to me. The first temple lasted nearly 4 centuries. For centuries during which Jerusalem went through periods of glory and crisis, during which the kingdom of Israel split in two, during which the prophets preached in its streets, during which kings made pacts with Egypt or Assyria as circumstances dictated. And then, in the year 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon arrived. The Babylonian king was one of the most systematic and most brutal conquerors the ancient world had produced up to that point. He besieged Jerusalem, took it after months of desperate resistance, burned the temple to the ground, destroyed the walls, and deported most of the Jewish population to Babylon. What the texts call the Babylonian exile was one of the founding traumas of Western civilization. Psalm 137, that poem of absolute grief that says, "By the rivers of Babylon we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion," was written at that moment. It is one of the most reproduced texts in the history of humanity, and it was born from the pain of a people who had lost their city and did not know if they would ever get it back. The Greek period, which in Jewish history is known as the Hellenistic period, produced one of the most intense and most revealing cultural conflicts of antiquity. The successors of Alexander, especially the Seleucid kings who controlled Syria and the region, tried to Hellenize Judea. They wanted the Jews to adopt Greek culture, the Greek language, the Greek gods. And in Jerusalem, there was a Jewish upper class that was genuinely enthusiastic about that idea, that built gymnasiums in the Greek manner, that adopted Greek names, that participated in the Olympic Games. But when King Antiochus IV Epiphanes went too far, when he desecrated the temple by placing a statue of Zeus in it and prohibited Jewish religious practices under penalty of death, the Maccabean revolt erupted. A family of rural priests led a guerrilla war that for 3 years faced the most powerful Seleucid army in the region, and that ended with the purification of the temple and the restoration of Jewish worship. The festival of Hanukkah, which millions of Jewish families celebrate today around the world, commemorates exactly that moment. It is the victory of the Maccabees over Antiochus. It is Jerusalem resisting once again, but Maccabean independence lasted less than a century. In the year 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey the Great entered Jerusalem. The Romans did not destroy the city or the temple, at least not in that first moment. They simply made it part of their imperial machinery. Roman Judea was a problematic, restless province, full of religious and political tensions that Roman governors never quite managed to fully understand. In that context, sometime around the year 6 or 4 BC, according to different academic traditions, a Jewish boy was born in Bethlehem, a few kilometers from Jerusalem, named Yeshua in Aramaic, which in Greek would be translated as Isis, and which the world knows today as Jesus. What happened in Jerusalem in the following years? The preaching, the triumphal entry into the city on what the Christian tradition calls Palm Sunday, the Last Supper, the crucifixion at Golgotha, the resurrection that the New Testament describes with such topographical precision that archaeologists have been able to locate the sites with surprising accuracy. All of that turned Jerusalem into the holiest place in Christianity. A city that was already the center of the Jewish world also became the center of the Christian world. And there was still one more religion to come. In the year 70 AD, the Roman general Titus, son of the Emperor Vespasian, crushed the great Jewish revolt against Rome with a brutality that the historian Josephus, an eyewitness, described in such chilling detail that his texts remain difficult to read today. The Second Temple was destroyed. The walls of Jerusalem were torn down. The city was sacked and its inhabitants massacred or enslaved. The menorah, the seven-branched candelabrum of the temple, was carried to Rome in triumph and is depicted on the Arch of Titus that can still be seen today in the Roman Forum of the entire temple. Only one retaining wall on the western side remained standing, a supporting wall of the platform on which the temple had been built. That wall is what is called today the Western Wall, and it is the holiest place in Judaism in the world. 2,000 years after the destruction of the temple, millions of people continue going to that wall to pray, to weep, to leave small folded papers with their prayers in the cracks between the stones. 60 years after Titus, the Emperor Hadrian attempted to definitively erase the Jewish memory of Jerusalem. He built on its ruins a completely new Roman city called Aelia Capitolina, banned Jews from entering under penalty of death, and erected a temple to Jupiter on the site of the ancient Jewish temple. It was the most ambitious attempt to erase Jerusalem from collective memory. It failed. The Jews continued looking toward Jerusalem from the diaspora to which they had been forced. Christians continued venerating the places where their history had occurred. And in the 4th century, when the Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity and his mother Helena traveled to the Holy Land to identify the sacred sites, Jerusalem shone again. Constantine built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on the site that tradition identified as the place of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. The church is still standing today, rebuilt, expanded, disputed among different Christian denominations that sometimes literally fight in its corridors, but there, in the same place. And then came Islam. In the year 638 AD, the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab entered Jerusalem without violence, in a gesture that the chroniclers of the era described with astonishment, because conquests of that time were not normally done that way. Omar visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and when the hour of prayer arrived, he deliberately went outside rather than pray inside the church, explaining that if he prayed there, his followers might claim it as a place of Islamic worship. But what made Jerusalem sacred for Islam was not only its shared history with Judaism and Christianity. It was the night of the Isra and Miraj, the night journey that the Prophet Muhammad had made decades earlier. According to Islamic tradition, from the sacred mosque in Mecca to the farthest mosque, Al-Aqsa, which was identified with Jerusalem, and from there his ascension to the heavens. What must be understood about Jerusalem? What this entire 4,000-year history teaches us, if we look at it honestly, and without the lens of any side, is that this city has the power to make people forget what they know about pragmatism, about compromise, about the possibility of finding imperfect solutions that allow people to live together. It has the power to turn political disputes into existential conflicts. It has the power to make the past weigh so heavily that the present becomes impossible to manage. And at the same time, in its markets, in its streets, in its neighborhoods where Armenians and Jews and Muslims and Christians live meters away from each other, it also shows that when history does not weigh so heavily, when politics calms down even for a moment, coexistence is not only possible but real and everyday. Jerusalem is not only a problem, it is also a demonstration that the problem has a solution, because for centuries there have been periods when that solution existed. Before you go, I need you to write to me in the comments your opinion. Do you think the conflict over Jerusalem has a solution in the 21st century? Or do you think that 4,000 years of history have created a knot that no generation will ever be able to untie? It is one of the most difficult questions in the contemporary world, and I want to know what you think, not what the news channels say. Write to me down below. And if you want to keep understanding the world in a way that the news does not give you, the next video is waiting. See you there.